White pawn marches to e4. Black pawn marches to c6. White knight marches to c3. Black pawn marches to d5. White knight marches to f3. Black pawn captures pawn at e4. White knight captures pawn at e4. Black knight marches to f6. White knight retreats to g3. Black pawn marches to h5. White pawn marches to h3. Black pawn marches to h4. White knight retreats to e2. Black pawn marches to c5. White knight marches to c3. Black knight marches to c6. White bishop marches to c4. Black bishop marches to f5. White pawn marches to d3. Black pawn marches to e6. White bishop marches to g5. Black bishop marches to e7. White bishop captures pawn at h4. Black pawn marches to a6. White pawn marches to a3. Black pawn marches to b5. White bishop retreats to a2. Black queen marches to d7. White bishop retreats to g3. Black rook moves sideways to d8. White kingside castling. Black queen moves sideways to b7. White knight retreats to e2. Black pawn marches to c4. White pawn marches to d4. Black bishop marches to e4. White knight retreats to e1. Black knight marches to d5. White pawn marches to c3. Black bishop marches to d6. White bishop captures bishop at d6. Black rook captures bishop at d6. White bishop retreats to b1. Black bishop captures bishop at b1. White rook captures bishop at b1. Black queen moves sideways to e7. White queen marches to c2. Black pawn marches to e5. White pawn captures pawn at e5. Black rook moves sideways to g6. White queen marches to e4. Black queen captures pawn at e5. White queen captures queen at e5 and gives check. Black knight captures queen at e5 and breaks check. White king moves sideways to h1. Black knight marches to d3. White knight captures knight at d3. Black pawn captures knight at d3. White rook moves sideways to d1. Black pawn captures knight at e2. White rook captures knight at d5. Black rook moves sideways to e6. White rook moves sideways to e1. Black rook marches to h4. White rook retreats to d2. Black rook moves sideways to e4. White pawn marches to f3. Black rook retreats to e5. White king moves sideways to g1. Black pawn marches to a5. White king marches to f2. Black pawn marches to b4. White pawn captures pawn at b4. Black pawn captures pawn at b4. White pawn captures pawn at b4. Black rook moves sideways to b5. White rook captures pawn at e2. Black rook captures pawn at b4. White rook captures rook at e6 and gives check. Black pawn captures rook at e6 and breaks check. White rook captures pawn at e6 and gives check. Black king escapes check at f7. White rook retreats to e2. Black pawn marches to g5. White pawn marches to g4. Black king marches to g6. White king marches to g3. Black resigns and white wins the game.